That's a great question. I think I'm definitely afraid of loss of identity. I'm afraid of loss of freedom, flexibility. So much of my happiness and joy comes from flexibility and freedom. The ability to jump on a plane and go somewhere. Not that we've been able to this year, but that's a huge part of what fuels me deeply, like in a soul level.
Have you not been fulfilled this year because of coronavirus
It
then?
definitely has affected things, but I've found ways to still, be content.
Yeah.
I'm not going to I'm not going to be miserable about it is what I'll say, but I miss it deeply. Yeah.
Mm.
And then I think another aspect that I'm terrified of is just this sense that probably every new parent feels is like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I guess that's the instinctual part that hopefully kicks in. And I feel that a little bit with my, just like puppy, even it's like these aspects of my personality that I didn't even know existed are coming to the surface.
Like what?
Um, it's a mirror. So I'm getting reflections of what kind of parent I'm going to be and how I handle difficult situations. But I found out that I'm like pretty chill. I'm pretty good under stress, and I don't freak out a lot, but I do get super protective. Like if anybody fucks with my dog or says something or anything, I just get really protective. If even like my wife made a comment one time about like, oh, that was, like what he did, like he needs to be smarter. That was dumb. I'm like, he is not. I'm like, this is the smartest dog, man. This, but I started getting
she's attacking you. She's not
oh
attacking the
yeah,
dog.
yeah. What
At
about
least that's
you?
how you perceive it, right?
Probably, yeah.
It's like the dog is an extension of your capabilities in some way.
Oh yeah, it's a representation. Yeah, an
Yeah.
extension. Yeah. What things you said you also felt that?
Oh, totally. And I was embarrassed because exactly like you said, not many people talk about it, or it's not like
No.
a popular thing to be like, um, I had to grieve being single,
Mm,
losing that, where it was like, I felt like but before we got married, we got engaged, and then a week later found out we were pregnant, or my wife was
mm-hmm.
pregnant. And so that was much more of a shock because it took me some time to kind of get comfortable with the idea of getting married and and realizing like, man, I feel like I just figured out dating, or like just got good
Yeah.
at like being attractive to women and
Mm-hmm.
like knowing what I'm doing, and then to give up that freedom, those options felt really devastating to me. And I didn't do a good job of openly accepting that was an issue.
Yeah.
Instead I tried to hide it and be like, just deal with it, just deal with it. And so what happened was I spent 9 months basically being kind of an asshole at times, and
Mm,
like resentful. And if I had just like grieved it, if I had, truly like wept about it, or, had anger come out of me, um, like been intentional about it, it wouldn't have been a
mm.
big deal. But it took me a long time to really accept that was like, hey, this is what I'm going through. Um, the, Feelings are facts.
Mm-hmm.
Let them be expressed. You don't have to like take it out on your wife. You can
Mm-hmm.
just express your feelings, and then it'll be great. I talked to a woman who runs a practice called Emotionally Engaged,
Yeah.
and she is specifically a therapist for people who are in the process of getting married or in a transition in marriage.
Mm,
She might be somebody you might want to talk to. But she was great because she helped me see, okay, there are some valid concerns I have with becoming a dad, because there were,
yeah,
a few unhealthy dynamics growing up, as most of us have, right?
definitely.
Like whether it's, didn't have boundaries, whether it's like, one of your parents had emotional issues that rain down on you, or it can be
Mm-hmm.
even worse. You kind of have to address those and be like, I need to examine those, process them, so that I'm not projecting my shadow self onto my kid, messing them up. There's totally valid
Which
concerns.
is such a terrifying idea as well. That's another thing, is like, if we have not made certain unconscious things conscious before parenthood, I think that's another thing that terrifies me, is like, I want to do all the work, make sure I made everything conscious, which of course is impossible. You won't make everything conscious till the day you die. So, and that's a lifelong process, but it is something where you're like, you don't want to, display the wrong aspects of yourself or behavior and create, you don't want to continue the wrong characteristics from your own ancestors. You want all the right ones. That's just, in a sense, like the definition of personal evolution, right? It's like we take the good and we remove the bad, and everybody has bad and every person has bad in them. So it's like this constant improvement process, but that part is scary too, for sure.
It's totally scary. But the fact that you are talking about it and know the phrase, I need to make the unconscious conscious, is indicative that like you would be a good dad, because you know that like this is the area that can really hurt a kid and can hurt a family. And if you're aware that you need to do that work and then do it, like that's great. And so you can grow through that. And you talked about the things that you lost or that you could lose. And I think those are valid things to be aware of.
Yeah.
And begin grieving. The other thing to consider is you don't really even know what you have to gain until you experience it. And so it's like, you're worried about you can look at something as, I'm worried about losing money, or you can look at it as I'm excited about the investment I'm about to gain and all that's to come into my life, rather than what's about to leave or be exchanged. So that's another thing to consider, is it's really truly impossible to know. I'll tell you a quick story. I had I had that fear all through the pregnancy of what was to come, what I was losing. Am I going to be a good dad? Am I going to screw things up? Am I even prepared for this?
Right.
And like friends would, kind of assure me I was, but I had so much self-doubt and self-criticism. And the day, I think it was the day of or the day after, my daughter took a nap. My baby daughter took a nap on my chest. And I remember just like, just tears coming out of my eyes in relief. Because as soon as it was made real, I knew it would be okay. Like it was a moment to moment thing, rather than I'm thinking too far out into the future. It'd be like if, when you do the dishes, do you ever sit there and think, oh my God, I'm going to do like tens of thousands of more dishes over the course of my lifetime. Like, why should I even do this? Screw this. Right. You don't think of it. It's just one dish at a time. And it's similar with kids, where it's like one moment at a time.
Wow. That's a great story that I'm sure I'll remember, because it's like, we are thinking about the outcome of how is this thing that I'm creating going to end up? How is it affecting me? To be honest, though, a lot of the thoughts tend to be more selfish, and I'm okay with that. I know that, I acknowledge that. And that's why I actually like to discuss these things with people who are willing to. Again, I bring it up with certain friends and they're like, Armand, you're just being blah, blah, blah. Or no, it's not like that at all. It's the best thing ever. And I'm like, I've heard that it's the best thing ever. Somebody please be honest with me about the things that you wish you could discuss, but you have shame and guilt around discussing. Please, who can do that for me? Because everybody has that, no matter what. And I think that they come down to like little selfish things that are part of our character, that are part of our construct of ourself, and that we have to learn to let go. Because if life consistently stayed in one phase of independence and freedom forever, that would be immature, and that would be an unfulfilling life in the end, without growth and change and evolution. So I think eventually we shift toward the responsibility phase of our lives, where we maybe you get a house, maybe you have more space, maybe you get a backyard like me, maybe you get a puppy, maybe you have a baby, and those things, and maybe you have a more consistent career or job or whatever it might be. And those things maybe 5, 10 years ago feel like, oh, I could never do that. But eventually, if you don't, you're the 50-year-old dude at the bar trying to pick up chicks that are half your age. And no judgment, because that guy seems pretty cool too sometimes. But I mean, to each their own. Like, seriously, no judgment. But I don't think that that necessarily fits into the rest of society in a way that isn't jarring. And I think ultimately you'd feel a little bit more alone than you already probably feel. A lot of people already experience loneliness, and that would not be good either. So to like, this independence and freedom that I want, I'm aware of the fact that it's not good forever, but it's just hard to let go of. And so then it becomes like a hybrid. How do you find the sweet spot and maintain your independence? I'm so lucky, Charlie, because my wife's unbelievable. Like, we can talk about these things and I share them with her, and she'll support, and she'll say, Armand, you just, yeah, like, we'll just work it out where you, like, do you need a month away every year? Do you need a few days away every month? Like, what do you need? That's a part of you. She's like, I've seen you. When you don't get that, you're not the same. I support you having that. That's like, I can't, yeah, I feel very lucky that I can have someone in my life to understand that, and that understands, like, when I have my needs met, her needs are met, and vice versa. Her needs are my needs as well. And that's really hard. Although I don't know, like, when there's a baby, do things change? They might. Yeah. It might get even more challenging, and that might go out the window. I need you here.
Yeah, man, there's not, everything that you bring up is 100% valid. I think everybody struggles with this in some capacity because, like, at our core, we're, as a society, like, we've deviated from the way human beings evolved, and my wife and I talk about this too. It's like, I would much rather live in a tribe of family, friends, than in a single person house. Like, if it was structured in a way where we were surrounded by our people all the time, like, that would be wonderful. That's not how the world works, unfortunately. And so a lot of people grapple with these things because, I mean, there's so many layers of it, right?
Yes.
It's like, what are you getting the government involved for in this decision? And yet, like, there's pluses and minuses. There's arguments for and against every single facet of it. And it's complex, which is why, I don't think like, and you can talk about, is a long-lasting marriage even a successful marriage? How do you even define success? Like, when people do the conscious uncoupling, like, that's still somewhat stigmatized because that's like, oh, is that a divorce?
Sure.
Is it not? But it's like, hey, they're clearly both growing potentially. Yeah. Like, maybe they hit the point where it's like growing together no longer makes sense. So it's just, it all depends on how you view it. And so I don't know. I've always looked at becoming a parent and, like, having more responsibility as, like, this is the next phase of my growth. Like, this is what growth is.
Absolutely.
And I think of, like, Seinfeld actually put it really well in one of his stand-up bits. He's like, when I was single, I looked at married people and I thought, how depressing. And now that I'm married, I look at single people and think, oh, how hollow and empty. It's just like, it's very easy to see both sides of the equation once you're on the other side.
Yes. And if you've developed enough of a strong enough mindset to look at things through a growth lens, then no matter where you are, you're going to hopefully see it in the right way for what it is. It's like, if you're, my brother's leaving San Francisco right now. One of my friends was telling me this yesterday. He was like, he's finally leaving that zombie land of San Francisco, which has just become desolate and eerie. We're recording this August 20th. And And he has never admitted that he wanted to get out of there, that he hated it, that it was dreadful, anything like that, until the day that he's leaving. And that shows a lot, because it's kind of like how you talk about an ex. It's like, oh, finally, out of that. You don't really admit it while you were in it. And I think that that's part of a healthy mindset, actually, because you don't want to focus on the things that you can't control until you've made the decision to change it. And so if you're a father, or you're single, or you're in a relationship, or you're not, or mother or not, part of it is just acknowledging where you're at and actually finding deep enjoyment in the phase that you're in. I love your ability to look at things in such a nuanced way, Charlie. It's so refreshing. I want to ask you, actually, this was on my mind. I was like, is there something that's been on your mind lately, especially it could be around baby number 2, fatherhood, but things that you haven't had the ability to discuss, like that you want to use this time, like, to dive into? Like, have you been thinking about something that you're just like, that's been on my mind, and I haven't had an outlet?
I love that. That's a great question. Yes. I mean, I'll tell you, I think the most compelling, interesting thing that I've really dived into is what we touched on, which is the shadow self, and like the turning toward the inner world of the parts of yourself that you have abandoned, pushed to the side, neglected, resisted, because there's shame, fear, pain all wrapped up in that, and becoming friends with it, so that maybe you don't shine so brightly, but you become a much more whole person who's more comfortable in their own skin. And this is stuff that I kind of just got into by total accident, like never even really, I didn't know it was like this whole field of psychology that's like one of these essential pillars of human behavior. I didn't know really anything about it, that Carl Jung dedicated so much of his work to it, and like how scary it is. Yes. It's terrifying. It's truly terrifying. Which is why I was glad that you touched on it. That's the thing I've been most fascinated with. That's been the biggest area of my growth by far. To the point where I'm like, yet another thing where I'm like, why wasn't this brought up in school? This is like,
I was going to say that earlier. Yeah. We're not taught. This is all stuff that we have to figure out as adults on our own, and stumble around aimlessly until we go, oh shit, that seems important.
Yeah.
Probably learn about this.
Yeah.
Carl Gustav Jung. Okay. Guess I got to see what he was up to. Yeah. It's real stuff. And it's the process of individuation. And that is, from Jung's perspective, the ultimate path toward connection to self, which some people call God or the universe. And so it's a deeply spiritual, deeply terrifying process. I mean, even looking back, I wonder if you now, as you gain certain tools and things that you become aware of, do you ever look backwards and go, oh, like that's perhaps why I was experiencing deep anxiety or depression? I kind of had a similar moment like that, where I sort of thought that anxiety and depression were things that just happened and you couldn't really help. And they were part of external circumstances that you have to change something, and you have to, there's a control aspect. Like if all I did was just change certain things, I could solve this. And to a certain degree, I think that's true. And I think you have the guidebook, like literally the book on how to do that with Play It Away. And you describe like, these are the things that you can do today to start to feel better. And I love those. And I think we should talk about some of those, because it's new for me. And I've been going through your book before we talked. And at the same time, isn't it interesting that sometimes the process seems to need to complete itself? Like from Jung's perspective, when we are in that darkness, that terrible place, it's sort of this process of facing the shadow and all of our energy in our body and in our psyche being depleted, so that we have no choice but to face whatever it is we need to face, some sort of truth about ourselves. Do I need to change an aspect of my behavior or character? Is this working for me? Do I need to change my career? Do I need to change my relationship? Do I need to love myself because I've actually done a really shitty job of that? And all these things sort of just like vroom, come into your face, or they don't, because you keep avoiding them. And then the depression and the anxiety and the pain just gets harder and harder and harder until it's like you face it, and then only can you graduate and get some relief. In my experience, that's what it has felt like anytime that kind of event has taken place. And then I do things like exercise and get the right sleep and get off caffeine and get off alcohol. And those things really make a massive difference, of course, and can't be overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people listening, I think I've had a lot of conversations with people who've done intensive talk therapy and all this stuff, and they've asked like, how the hell do you even do this? Right. So let me give some examples in the process that I go through and how I've gotten to that point, because it may be helpful to people listening. So you ever have something you keep thinking about, like this painful event or somebody hurting you in some way, that it crops up every now and then and it just puts you in a funk? Have you had something like that maybe happened a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a debt that you carry with you every single day, because whenever it comes up, it changes your emotional state, right? You are still attached to it. And I believe that's because you haven't processed it. It was too painful. It was too, and you push it off to the side, right? As soon as it comes in, you're like, damn it. Like, no, get away. I'm going to go distract myself. So for people like us who are maybe defined as achievers, we turn to work, right? Let's go work to take our minds off of that. Other people turn to drugs and alcohol. Other people turn to exercise, some to smoking, whatever. You find a way to avoid the emotion. And that is, I believe, the definition of either depression or anxiety, is you're doing everything you can to resist the expression of that emotion because it's so painful and frightening that you would just rather suppress it. The problem with debt, though, is that you carry it around and it compounds. And so if you think holding a cup of water for a day sounds difficult, try holding a cup of your tears for 10 years. Right. So that is a huge weight that you're carrying with you. So for me, I'll give some examples. I was friends, and I still am, but I've been friends with a pretty famous author. No one I've worked with professionally. Like you wouldn't. It's not somebody that I won't list his name, but. I heard from somebody that he was talking bad about me. He was basically, this person told me like, yeah, he's never actually liked you. He thinks you're a bit of a joke. And it really shocked me to hear this, because I was like, man, I've had him over at my parents' house. Like, we've gone skiing together. We've done all these things together. That doesn't really add up. Like, we've supported each other. It doesn't make sense to me. And so I was really injured by this, because it felt like almost bullying going on behind my back, or, spreading gossip, or like, I guess, damaging to my reputation. It just felt like a lot of things.
That can be very enraging. That happened to me once as well.
Yeah. It was really hurtful. And instead of confronting him with this, I started looking for proof points that was true. And your mind is very good at coming up with proof points as soon as you've decided, like, I need to search for this as the reality. So all of a sudden I was like, he did this, he said this. That guy was probably right. And so for 5 years, I just wrote him off as like, I guess we never had the relationship that I thought we had, and never thought we had the friendship. And this was not an easy thing because I still was deeply angry about it. I never got to express that. I never got to say anything. And so every time his name would come up, I would feel that anger.
Yeah.
And in that hurt. And I would just try and suppress it. That was the case for 5 years. And this is a pretty famous author. So it would come up a lot. And so the interesting thing was I decided, so I've, a quick tangent, I've done a lot of volunteer work with veterans and soldiers who are in transition. And as a result, I've learned a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder. And what I found fascinating was all of us have experienced trauma. So many people say, what I went through isn't that bad. I never got assaulted. There's uppercase T trauma where it's like clear as day. Yeah. And then there's lowercase T trauma, which is like social injuries. It's distressful experiences that have heightened emotional states. And we've all experienced those. And so I realized, wow, I've definitely experienced trauma, not the uppercase T, but a lot of lowercase t, and probably haven't done the best job of processing it. And the interesting thing I learned was all forms of trauma treatment basically are terrible, with one exception, MDMA therapy, which is in the process of being legalized now. Whereas the second most effective therapy is like 30%, elimination of symptoms, and then they come back a year later. MDMA therapy, 90% elimination of symptoms and improved results a year later. It's like the penicillin for treating trauma.
Yeah.
And so
it's similar to the results we've seen with psilocybin research in the retreat that was done, like almost in parallel, but for different purposes.
Yes, psilocybin's very good. MDMA is the gold benchmark. It is specifically for trauma treatment.
For trauma.
It's the best you can find. And so I decided I'm going to do this. One of my best friends is a trained psychologist, luckily. And so he was my guide on the first session. And this experience came up. It was one of the first things that came up. It was top of mind. And suddenly I'm in this experience in my head. I have a blindfold on. Where I'm confronted with him. And all of a sudden, my body tenses up in anger. And I'm having to actually express for the first time in 5 years what I needed to say and the pain I felt and the hurt I felt. And the emotion finally poured out of me. It was anger, it was sadness. And then about 10, 15 minutes after I'd fully expressed that emotion, there was laughter and there was a feeling of love and compassion. And hey, even if, you said that or not, like I care for you. I'm so happy for your success. Like I want to see you do well. And I'm sad that came to an end, that we can't express that. And because of that session, after that, I would kind of swirl his name in my head around for the next week and just see, like, where's the emotion? There is no emotion attached to it.
Really?
It's just a name now. Interesting. So there's no triggering here. And so that gave me the courage, with some pressing from a friend, to email him and tell him, hey, this is what happened. This is how I felt about it. I was hurt. And I want you to know that happened, but I processed it. And, I wish you the best, basically. And that was that. And so less than a half hour later, he wrote me a really long email saying, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I never said those things. Like, I'm so sorry that person said that. That is not how I feel at all. And I wish, and it was like, we got on the phone together the next week. We talked for an hour and it was just like, it was back to normal. And I realized,
wild,
because I was in so much pain about the possibility that this person didn't like me, I never stopped to think about hey, that person told me that at a party. What if he was drunk? What if he was just messing with me? What if, all these possibilities? And I realized,
Yes.
like, I didn't even open myself to that possibility, nor did I
Mhm.
process the emotions. And because of that, I carried around that pain for years. And that's
God.
just one example. Like,
One.
I've done I've done 2 sessions of MDMA therapy, and I've done about 10 where I was just going through the physical process of releasing the emotion on my own, revisiting these past
Mhm.
traumas and letting them go, and
Just
expressing
trauma
the emotion
therapy without the
without the
MDMA.
MD. Yeah,
Okay.
all it
Yeah.
is for me, this is my process. I lay on a bed in my basement,
Mm.
after my family's gone to sleep, so no one's, gonna hear me, and I just engage with whatever comes up in my mind. I do improv basically with it, where
Mm.
I do a scene where I'm revisiting the pain, and I go through it, and I feel as deeply as possible the pain that I felt in that moment, whether it was fear, whether it was anger, whether anything that I've tried to suppress. It could even be sexual, it could be violence, it can be anything. But I allow my body to fully express that.
Mhm.
That thing that I totally clamped down on. And once I've fully expressed it, which takes anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes, I then relive it again
Mm.
as the man I am today. I protect my younger self. I parent my
Mm.
younger self. And sometimes if I don't know what to do, I'll ask my future self, Charlie, when he's 75 years old, to come
Mhm.
parent both of us. And I just kind of do this scene, and that's how I heal myself, because
Wow.
that's what comes up for me during these MDMA sessions, is that type of healing process. And the cool thing is, it taught me you cannot really heal without the body's help. It can't be
Mm.
a thought process. It can't even be like really,
Very
I've
true.
talked to my therapist and I shed a few tears about this, and then I was free. It's like, no, you have to physically express. You have to use all systems at the same
Mm.
time, mind, emotion, and body, and physically get it out. So when I've
What
expressed,
can that look like?
weird. That's
Yeah.
why I do it alone.
Yeah.
Right? When
Yeah.
I've had to express anger at the highest level, I've had to literally murder people in my mind to get over
Mhm.
it. Where that's the shadow, right? We're
Yeah.
all capable of that type of
Oh
anger
yeah.
and
You better
violence.
believe it.
Yeah.
You
And
better
so,
believe it.
if you don't have control over that, it made me understand, this is why people shoot people in
Yes.
public, is the shadow is such a thick cloud that they no longer have control over, that they
Right.
haven't processed, that the only way they can process it is just to go out there and kill people. Which is like, do you want to deal with not having that control over yourself, or do you
Right.
want to do it in a safe setting
Yeah.
where you can imagine it, process it, and then that anger's gone? That's the thing. I've had deep rage and anger again around certain people, very certain people
Mm. Mhm.
who I perceived as them hurting me deeply.
Right.
Um, and when I've gone through that exercise, anger's gone. I can
Hmm.
be around them again, neutral. It is like, that's the power of exploring. I call it playing with your shadow.
Mm.
Is when you can play with your
There you go,
shadow.
gamifying it.
Yeah, when you embrace it,
Yeah.
when you make it a
Yeah.
game, when you make it a scene that you
Yes.
act out, and you're with your shadow and acknowledging it, all of a sudden this dark, stormy cloud that controlled you shrinks down,
Right.
and it's your partner, and it helps you become healed and a more whole person who's comfortable in their own skin.
And it's so dangerous to not acknowledge the darkness within yourself, because that cloud can just keep expanding and it can manifest itself in crazy ways. You may not go out in the street and murder somebody. I hope not. I hope we continue to see that go away in society through this type of work, but you may project out how you feel internally without understanding where that anger, that insult, that rude remark came from. And in fact, we could even think about one aspect of your story. What if the person who told you that sounds like a lie, from what you uncovered as a lie, or whatever their motivation was, that could literally be a form of their shadow, their jealousy, their envy, their pain they're projecting onto you. Let me say something to Charlie, who's gotten to work with all these famous authors and make a remark to make him feel bad because looks like he feels so good about himself. I'm just making shit up, but who knows, right? And all of that comes from the inability to face our own shadow. And another benefit of it too is, I wonder for you, like when you go through this type of work, does it increase your level of compassion and understanding for others and remove your judgment?
That's probably the best part of it. And that's one of my highest values is compassion. Is like, when you go through this work, you understand. I mean, like Jordan Peterson's talked about it. You understand Nazis. You understand school shooters. You understand rapists. You understand all these people who've been severely hurt and damaged to the point that, and they have no guidebook. They have no way of knowing how to help themselves heal themselves so that they're not a danger to society. And I think now more than, Brene Brown talks about, like, she kind of makes this statement in her documentary where she's like, stop working out your shit on other people, which I couldn't agree with more. But she doesn't give you the recipe. How?
Yeah, how?
Great. Tell us what we should do.
It's coming out on accident.
Right. And you'll see this as a father, right? If you haven't processed that stuff, all of a sudden you have the most precious person alive in front of you who loves you so much, and you are working out your stuff onto them. Like you are unable to control this program that seems to run itself. You can't reel it in because the emotions are too strong, the wiring's too strong, and it's because you haven't dealt with your shit. And if you deal with it, you don't have to hurt them. And the easiest way to know if you have shit you need to have worked out is when something happens, a sentence comes up, a person comes up, do you have a really strong emotional reaction to them that's not favorable that you have to hide? You got some shit you got to work out, right?
Dude, this is literally one of the most important topics and conversations we could be having. This is, that quote that you said that stood out. That was a quote by Jung, actually. The complete quote is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life. And you will call it fate. Everyone is the fucking problem, not me. Because look at my life. But you don't realize the fact that you're just unconsciously living, and everything that's happening to you, you view as an injustice, and you go into victim mode for the rest of your life. And you wake up one day and you've caused so much pain onto others unconsciously. Accidentally, you project it out because you don't know the recipe, and you wake up one day and you're alone, or you're miserable, or there's so many things, or you're addicted to something and you have no idea how you got there. The interesting thing and fascinating thing about this is it's absolutely never too late. It doesn't matter. It's never too early. It's never too early. Please start early. I wish I knew this stuff at 12, 11, 13 years old, as I was becoming an adolescent and dealing with the shit that would end up impacting me later in life. But this is literally one of the most important conversations because, man, it's like, how many people do we know, our own friends, who have these sort of over the top reactions to things that occur within their lives, and you don't want to tell them that they're being out of their mind or that they're overreacting, but it's like something that causes an emotional reaction in me, and you look at me and you go, that's not that bad. It actually ends up making me more upset oftentimes. If you've ever seen that, it's like you tell somebody like, that's not a big deal. That person didn't mean it that way. And you're like, no, I know that, blah, blah, blah. Believe me, they're being vindictive. They're being this, they're being that. All that's happening
you invalidate their feelings.
Yeah. And all that's happening too is the old wound is just coming up for that person, like your analogy. And until we begin to do this work of facing the shadow, but also understanding that what puts me in a state that any time there's an emotional reaction, Jung referred to this as a complex. Anytime you're emotional, you're irrational. There's absolutely no way, and especially if you're dealing with another person, if you notice that they're being emotional or irrational in any way, there is literally like an entity that has taken over this person's psyche that causes them to do and say things that they would never, ever, ever do if they were conscious and removed from the complex. So you'll hear yourself say things, you'll hear other people say things, that I hate yous, the whatever that comes up in a relationship, or the pain, a fight with a friend, or whatever it might be. And this awful, awful stuff comes out. And if you ask that person later, like, where did that come from? They often say, I have no idea. I didn't mean any of it. And one of the greatest gifts that I can give others, because this is something I discovered for myself as well, if you ever do something that isn't you, the best thing you can do is feel guilty. Because guilt is actually the first step toward making that unconscious thing conscious. There's just a little bit of like regret, and not guilt in the sense of like, oh, I'm an awful person and blah, blah, blah. You kind of give yourself like this compassion of like, that's expected. I haven't worked my shit out. Go easy on yourself. But a little bit of guilt and remorse around, that was bad. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to be that way again. And that makes it conscious enough that the next time you're right about to go there, you're saying, whoa, 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 this isn't this person. They're not the problem. This is my shit. And you kind of can take that breath before that entity sort of takes over. I even name the entity. Like mine is Shrek and my wife's is Cruella. And when that energy starts showing up, it's like we can call it out and go, okay, right, Cruella's here, Shrek is here. Are you being Shrekky? Yeah, I am. Thank you for understanding. I need 5 minutes. and it's like, goes away. And these little skills that, God, I wish we could have learned earlier. But that's what makes life interesting. We get to learn this stuff. We get to grow. We get to make these things conscious. And it's incredible to actually, a lot of people have fears and anxieties around getting older. I like to take that perspective of it's fun to get older. It's fun to learn these things. Time passing by, yes, life is short, but a well-lived life is long. And I think that was Da Vinci. So there's so much to learn and so much to gain. And it can become fun to uncover these things like this, because now look at what it's done for your life. And then we get to have a little podcast and share it. And who knows how many people, that network effect of how it can help so many people as well, just us facing our own shit.
I agree wholeheartedly. And, to that last point, Armand, somebody told me years ago, a friend of mine who just truly had a horrific childhood. She told me that, and she'd done a ton of emotional work. She said, our generation's responsibility is simply to heal. And at the time, I thought, that doesn't sound right. That seems absurd. Of course, we have other responsibilities. But the more I think about it, the more I've experienced it, the more I believe she's absolutely right. Our parents' generation, the boomers, I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they are turning in toward themselves. I think everybody's turning outward and looking for others to blame. And I think we can only accept the responsibility of doing the lonely, but like you said, the fun, playful work of examining. And you said, when that stuff comes up, feel some guilt. You feel the pain, so you don't do it again. I think there also has to be this deep level of like curiosity and almost excitement of seeing this is my next level of growth. Yes. And I can actually, instead of running from this, I can turn into it and examine it and play with it and examine these scenes from my life where I was bullied, I was shamed, I was hurt, and turn it into my next superpower. Because I really believe with all these wounds, once you turn them into scars, you now have a superpower. You now have compassion for people who go through it. And it's
you
like
understand it. You see it at Starbucks and you're like, oof, I've been there.
Sure. Yeah. And,
You know?
and not only that, it's like you come from a place of calm rather than fear and anger. And it's that line, hurt people, healed people, heal people. And so you have the ability then to turn that outward and guide other people down. Hey, you are loved. You are safe. Explore this rather than having them constantly be in a state of fear and pushing it away their whole life, which is I truly believe.
I see people become righteous, right? Like we've all done that, where the anger that we feel, we're like, don't tell me if anybody says anything. Don't tell me I'm not right about how I feel. Trust me, that person's a son of a bitch. And they double down on their story rather than becoming curious to say, why am I feeling this way? Even like the most basic level of relationship, therapy or relationship, like what a healthy relationship would look like is if you ever get into a conflict, what do? You don't come and try to help the other person figure out all the shit they did wrong. You don't even look at the other person. You look at yourself. You come to the table and you say, this is what I can do better. This is what I made a mistake on. These are the things that I'm making conscious. Anytime there's 2 people, 3 people, whatever it is in a relationship of any kind, you have to go inward to yourself. If you even begin to look at the other person, you lost. You already lost the plot.
It's more than that. It's more than losing. Anytime you're trying to control someone else's behavior, you're actually saying, I can't control my emotional reaction. And therefore, you need to comply so that I can control my emotions. You see this all the time with social justice warriors and these people who are trying to edit other people's behavior constantly, cancel culture, all this stuff. And it's like, you have deep emotions that you're reacting to things so strongly that you are exhausted by the world outside of you, which you have no control over. So you are getting into this, let's cancel them, let's edit them, let's stop them, let's hurt them.
Right, let's hurt them.
And if you just turned inward instead of outward, if you just went in and tried to heal yourself and did it intentionally, you would stop reacting to the world. You would have joy.
You would really care. You'd say, I actually want these opposing beliefs and opinions because it's not about,
you would accept, and you would be more compassionate and loving, and imagine the ripple out effect if more people had that. Like you could actually change people's behavior and have them love you for it and take you as an example rather than as someone of fear.
Yeah, the world would be so boring if everyone said exactly what you wanted them to say and believed the same thing you want them to believe. The true definition of democracy is one in which we can actually engage in debate and be okay with not agreeing.
And still love the other person and see them in you rather than as the enemy, you see them as another part of you.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, you asked at the beginning of this, like, what is the thing you want to talk about? It truly is like, this is the area. And I know I'm not the first to come up with it. There's plenty of books on shadow work. There are therapists who do shadow work. But I find it to be the most impactful of anything. And we started this actually talking about your fears as a dad.
Yeah.
Being somebody who's responsible for others and taking care of them. Are you capable? And I think the fact that you know that this exists and that you can address these things gives you that potential to not have to fear it so much, that you're not going to damage somebody, that even certainly children are resilient and they can handle what you give them, but you do have control. You are responsible and you can change things.
The first step. I think you're absolutely right. It's like if a person can be aware of their fear, it's actually beneficial in some ways because they're also aware of what they may do that is or is not in the best in the best light, is not good for the child. Like me just simply being aware of that, and knowing that I might express parts of my shadow when I don't mean to, continually moves me in the right direction. A couple like resources that stand out to me for now until you write the book on this. Ego and the Archetype was written by Edward Edinger. It's so funny and ironic and synchronistic, which synchronicity is a Jungian term that he created. He created the entire concept of synchronicity. But right before this, what's that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Synchronicity gets thrown around a lot by the woo-woo new age crowd these days, but it's a Jungian analysis term, and one of his 18 volumes is literally synchronicity, the acausal effect. And he wrote an entire book on it, which I've been reading lately. And one of his students, Edward Edinger, wrote the book Ego and the Archetype, which I've been really, really enjoying, about the individual's journey to psychological wholeness, known as the process of individuation. This was Jung's basically like top student. Jung wrote the foreword for this book. There's a book that I also picked up because Jordan Peterson constantly raves about it, The Origins and History of Consciousness, by Eric Newman. And this was one of his top students. Eric Newman was. And many people have seen the image of the serpent eating its tail, that kind of famous archetypal image. And that's really the process of individualization. That's where it begins and ends. And there are these stages that people go through in life. So these are some resources that definitely dive into. And of course, you can read Jung directly, but most people can't because it's pretty dry and dense. But there are plenty of authors that have taken his work and made it a little bit more digestible. So yeah, man, it's very synchronistic that I was literally like peeling through these right before.
Totally.
There's another thing that's been on your mind lately that we were chatting about, and we were talking about this concept of, we're trying to come up with a phrase for it, but this concept of free work. And,
yes.
It's like this free work revolution that you have very much been a proponent of for years. I mean, dude, you've been talking about this. You've been doing it. You've been using it. In a nutshell, you're offering your mind, your services, your brain power, your skill set to a company, to a person, in exchange for the opportunity to get mentorship, to be working with them, close to them, with no necessarily a promise of a job. It has almost often led to a job, if not so much more for you. And I mean, for example, I know there's probably even more than this, but Seth Godin, Tucker Max, Tim Ferriss, Ramit Sethi, these are all people that you've worked with in some capacity. I know there's plenty more, but those are the most notable ones, right? And the expansion of your network. I mean, even where you work today, you work with Tucker Max today at the company Scribe, and like you probably wouldn't be there if you hadn't taken these steps, right? So like, I know you've been really fascinated by this, and then I pointed out like, yeah, that's how I am where I am, so much in the sense that I like my story is real simple. Like one of my examples that I shared with you, I was at Soho House in LA, that fancy place that all the influencers like to hang out at. And I had a meeting with Lewis House, and Lewis and I were just sitting there talking and, just kind of getting to know each other. And then kind of like right before we ended our meeting, there was no outcome. It was just like getting to know you. I don't have a sales pitch. And I was just like, dude, how do I add value to this guy? Because I really like him. We were talking about a course that he was going to do and some stuff I was like, this guy's just like a homie. It was casual. I really like this. I want to get to know him more. How do I add value? And at the time I was doing a lot of copywriting. And I was I was building a big reputation for myself as a copywriter and a launch strategist. And at that time, I think I'd had like 8 launches that had done over $1 million for various clients. And I was like, you know what? I charge a lot of money. I'm just going to offer it to Lewis for free and see what he says. And I was like, Lewis, look, like, you know what I do? And he's like, yeah, man. I mean, I can't afford you. And I was like, well, I'll do it for free. Like, let me just help you out. Like the next thing you've got going on, this launch for this course that you're going to do, I'll help you for free. I'll do the copy. And like, I won't even talk about the hours, nothing. Like, just let me help. And I mean, of course, he was just like, awesome. Like, are you kidding me? I just saved thousands of dollars and got help from someone that I know has done this for plenty of people before. And then, he's introducing me to Lori Harder after that. He's introducing me to all these people. I have a relationship with Lewis. We can text and meet up for lunch. I mean, it's just like a friend now. Who knows what that's going to lead to? But I didn't even do it for like, oh, I'm going to calculate how it's going to lead to the right things. You just do it. It's this go-giver attitude. You just do it. And so many people today will not. I'm in a group, because I used to live in San Francisco. I'm in a group called Hire Club. And I can't tell you, Charlie, how many times I see people go, yeah, the company was asking me to do this like spreadsheet as part of my hiring process. Fuck that. I'm not doing free work. And I'm like, dude, just do it and do a badass job and show that you do it better than anybody. And they're like, no, this is, and I kind of understand. I guess apparently that a lot of companies are abusing it and getting like free work and then not hiring them or anything like that. That's a little bit different, but like, why not you proactively go to the company that you want to work for and say, I will literally work for you for a month. Or as Tom Bilyeu says in that video you posted, 90 days, let me just give you everything I have in my entire skill set, my body, my everything. Give it to you all. And if you want to give me a job at the end, you can. And if you don't, that's fine too. What's up with people being so resistant to this? And then what's up with the ones that do it? Like, what have you seen for yourself? What is the impact? I just did my far removed analysis of what it's done for you, right? But you can address so much more what it has done for you. And what have you seen for other people around you as far as that have done this?
Yes. Yeah. So, and thank you for sharing your story. I wanted to hear the details on the free work stuff you've done, because you messaged me. I was like, damn, good. It doesn't surprise me at all. So with understanding free work, the first place to understand it is like to look at the current problem, right? Which most people don't even identify as a problem. I've spoken to 2 people this week who have told me they've been in the job hunt for more than 6 months, have applied to hundreds of companies, have gotten less than 10 interviews, and a 0% success rate.
Ugh.
And their idea to fix the problem is to get more experience, to boost their skill set.
Oh, no.
Get ready to get ready, right?
Oh, no.
And this is so common.
Or get another degree is what some friends tell me.
Get another degree. Yeah. And so there is a ton of the blind leading the blind. And people who justify it with certain mindsets of like, well, it's the coronavirus, like everybody's losing their jobs. Everybody's getting salaries cut. At least I'm not homeless. At least I'm not. And so that, which would normally be an okay mindset, right? Like to recognize your blessings and all this stuff. We're talking about creating dream jobs. Mm-hmm. We're talking about building a fulfilling career. That is not a helpful mindset to say, at least I'm not homeless. You got to be determined. You got to decide like what you clearly want, and don't just try and get your foot in the door. You kick the door down. You burst in like the Kool-Aid man through the wall, right? And so it is a fundamentally different mindset than most people have, which is I'll take what I can get. If I have to compromise, so be it. I'll do what everyone else does, which is blast out my resume. I'm using the one-click application so I can apply to 10 jobs a day, and it's just a numbers game. And all this is total bullshit.
It's total bullshit, man.
Horrible conventional wisdom. The conventional wisdom is never right. Otherwise, everybody would be in their dream job.
That's right.
I started by studying people who had their dream jobs, who were wealthy, who loved going to work. What did they have in common? Why are they able to play for a living while the rest of us have to work for the weekend and have to dream of vacation, dream of retirement, constantly thinking about tomorrow rather than what can I have today? What can I wake up excited about? What can I be thrilled and get into flow and lose track of time? All of a sudden it's 2 a.m. and I'm just as excited because I'm having a blast. And so I've always been deeply focused on, I am not going to compromise my everyday for some bullshit lie that may not work out, right? Retirement's
Right.
not guaranteed. You're not even guaranteed to live that long.
Right.
There are no guarantees. So I'm not going to sacrifice my joy and my zest for life in order for this potential payoff where tomorrow I can play. 60
it's
years from
ridiculous.
now, I can
Most
play.
of your waking hours go to this, to work.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, then the choice is you got to find the work that puts you in a flow, that makes you feel strong, that allows you to stay in the moment, that even if you weren't getting paid, it would be worth it. That's
right.
where free work comes from. I don't put the cart before the horse. I start with the work itself, and then payment can come later. That's why it's so essential, I believe, to do free work in anything that you do, because it is the true test. Would I do this even if I weren't getting paid? Does this bring me joy? Is this sustainable or not? If it's not, move on. Great.
Right.
We're talking about a dream career, not your next job. I'm talking about a dream career. It is very different. So if you don't make that choice, you are still making the choice, right? You are accepting a compromised life. And I talk to these people all the time who've been in jobs for 5-10 years, and they are desperate to get out because even if they're making the money, they are unfulfilled. It is a choice to honor your spirit. So I'll pause there before I go any further. But that's the philosophy I deeply believe in, and I've been talking about for close to 12 years.
And it resonates so deeply with what I believe in, because I would not have done any of the work that I've done today in terms of what I'm trying to do around the concepts around flow, the concepts that I've created an assessment called the Elements Assessment to help people uncover who they are and what they do best. Because I believe that when we understand that and we align our crafts, the things that we do best, with the right job, the dream career that gets us into flow, you can actually have a chance at flow and fulfillment. And flow being the most optimal experience in life. I mean, it's this incredible experience of timelessness and joy and creativity and connection to something. Why not make an attempt toward being in that space? Because if you're spending, and the thing that pissed me off that got me in this direction was I went and I climbed the success ladder as much as I could. And I landed with, a job at Google. And for a while it was cool. And then all of a sudden it became awful and stressful. And little things caused it to completely change its meaning. And I was like, wait a second, this doesn't fit me anymore. They're asking me to do things that have nothing to do with what I offer and my skill set. They don't even not they, because that comes off like I'm saying Google, like my department, my manager doesn't even like the best attributes about me. They're not, it was not a fit. It was not a fit. And I have this entrepreneurial spirit that isn't working in the corporate world. I'm very rebellious. I want to make change. I want to make things happen. And it's like, no, slow your roll, dude. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't work. What happened? How can I prevent this? Because to spend 8 hours 5 days a week, let's just say that's the average for most people, or more if you're type A workaholic, of your life, your waking hours doing this. I mean, you add in the commute, you add in the whatever. How many hours a day do most people have free time? It's like a few, if they're lucky, a handful. And then you become a dad and you have even less. So then you spend the majority of your life until retirement doing something that honestly, deep down, if we could really sit, and so how many people, Charlie, deny how miserable they are, right? Because they feel that they're too scared to do anything different. They just can't. It's like they're facing a shadow part of themselves, that there's a truth that's like, dude, you're miserable. What you really want to be doing is X, Y, and Z. And that's why you project out and you don't like the creatives that are out there. You make fun of the artists, you make fun of the entrepreneurs. Oh, he's going to lose it all when the recession happens. Why? Because you wish you were that person. Let's get real. And so if you're going to wake up one day and be on your deathbed, or even just something a little bit less dramatic, like be close to retirement and be like, damn, I just wasted my career. That is catastrophic to me. I couldn't agree with you more. And so that's why it's like, we both deeply resonate with this idea of playing for a living, of being in flow. What has it done for you? What has it allowed you to do?
Gosh, I mean, I'm technically 12 years into my career. I don't feel like I wasted a single year. I I feel like I do embody what my message is, or I'm very close, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like when I spend my time on work, there's very little that I dread, right? It feels like a game. It feels fun so consistently. Yes, there are days where I'm like, this isn't that fun. I got to just do this shit. Taxes suck, like all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But as a whole, I feel in integrity. I'm proud of the money that I make because it came with joy. Like it's a bonus. And I strongly feel I'm going to be a model for my children.
Mm.
And so a lot of people look at like, we're in this time of upheaval. Robots are going to take our jobs. Software is going to, make us redundant.
Mm-hmm.
Outsourcing, all these things. And it's like, I think this is the most exciting time ever to be a human being in the world of work. All those jobs you didn't want are going away. Yeah,
they sucked anyway.
They are not easy jobs. They are not fun jobs. They're not fulfilling jobs. Like artists are not being made redundant.
Right? That's right. Like, creativity will be accessible to the masses now, or will be the default choice.
Right. And it's like, not everybody's creative. I get that. Like there are people who truly like don't have any impulse to be creative. Great. You can still find work that's meaningful, that allows you to connect to human beings, that doesn't treat you like a number, like you can find stuff that is aligned with who you are as a human being. And so what it's done for me, it's afforded me opportunities that were my dream opportunities, truly. But I went from being a college graduate, living in my parents' basement in Colorado, applying to a bunch of jobs I didn't want, working on a ping pong table in the basement, and getting rejected and ignored, by the way, to being able to work with my heroes, being able to now I work at a company in a role that I feel is so just me. It's basically Charlie's seat at a company that has the #1 company culture in America, rated by Entrepreneur Magazine. And so I get paid to be me. I get paid to be the best parts of me and to nurture those parts of me. And I'm very blessed in that regard, but it's like I made a choice. I realized that the path that everyone tells you to take, they're only telling you to take it because they took it. It justifies what they did. It's not because they know a better way. And so I study. That's why I did that book, Play for a Living, is because I wanted to show people, hey, the people who've been crazy successful in their careers, doesn't matter their industry. A lot of them are creatives, yes, but they're in finance, they're in business, they're in normal jobs. They have this focus on the spirit of their work. Has to feel fun. It has to feel like it's the strongest parts of them. It has to make them vibrant. It has to make them feel alive. That is the thing. When you double down on your fun, the money kind of flows. It's like you get paid to be great at the game that you decided you wanted to play.
It's like Robert Greene's mastery.
Yeah.
It's like this process of, if you, as Alan Watts says, what would you do if money were no object, which is basically what you're saying. And if you do that, you develop expertise and mastery. And when you develop expertise and mastery in doing something that you would do without the money anyway, you have now raised your profile, let's just say, and your skill set to align with being in the top percent of what you do. And so then if you decided that you wanted to take on a client doing that, or offer your services to a company that needs that skill set, how could they not pay you more than everybody else? You're the best at that thing. You've been doing it because you deeply enjoy it. It's just kind of this inverse operation that's very simple but counterintuitive. And if we can sacrifice a bit, exercise a bit of patience and sacrifice a bit today to be okay with the unknown, the scary part of like, am I going to get the job offer if I give 30 days free work? Or if I do this project for free that I normally like, even my position, I won't name, I won't give specific rates, but let's just say 5 figures plus is what I would have made off this project. It would have been great. Nice little retainer and blah, blah, blah. To have the ability to say, whatever, I don't need to measure everything. And I definitely also don't need to know exactly what this leads to. Like Charlie, the impact of the free work that I've done, maybe I won't know still for another 5 years. Like, who knows? Mm-hmm. Right? And it just continues to accumulate. It's just like this currency that you're depositing in the world to then create this dream career of yours. And I still do it. I don't care where I'm at. If I see an opportunity, I still do it. You never graduate from it.
Yes. The moment, I gotta jump in before you tell this story, because I saw that too with people who I was like, wait, you're a multimillionaire, or the craziest ones were, I talked to Michael Ovitz, who's the former CEO of Walt Disney. Mm-hmm. He's also the founder of CAA, which is the most powerful talent agency in the world. And we talked, and he was like, oh, I started my career doing free work. Everything was free. I got into the positions that I got into because of free work. And then the other one was a friend of mine named Susan Dupre. She was the head of events for Apple's WWDC events. So she helped Steve Jobs launch the iPhone. She was involved with every little detail of that historic event. This is a woman who's considered one of the best event planners on the planet. The highest pressure, highest stress. All the details need to be right. She's the one you call. She's worked with James Cameron. She worked for HBO. You name it, she did it. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I still offer free work. Totally. There are opportunities that I want, and so I get them by removing the obstacle." And so to me, it's like, what do you value more? A quick paycheck, or a relationship that could change your life forever, or an opportunity that you will look back on for the rest of your life and say, thank God I had that. That was incredible. So I've talked to people as small as, they did. One of my students is a guy named Alex. He just had a fantasy of basically playing out Anthony Bourdain's role, right? Going around the world, trying out food and filming it. And that was it. And he found some people on Kickstarter who were doing that project. He helped them with the project to make sure it succeeded. And then he got to travel around the world, making these documentaries and testing out food. And he's like, before that, I was applying to all these jobs that I didn't want. I felt like I'd let my parents down, yet I'd felt like I was out of integrity with myself. And so I just offered this. And, a while later, the guy got back to me, and suddenly I'm transported into this world, right? And I've seen this with so many people who've worked with high-level people early in their careers when they have little experience. And it's because they took this path and they said, you know what? Money's the thing that you're worried about spending and losing. I'm going to eliminate that as the barrier. And here's what I can offer. By the way, this is what I tell my students to do is you come to them with a gift. Show them a sample of the work they're about to get. Let them use it. Let them take it and run. Yeah. And if you're good, they'll hire you. They'll accept that. Warren Buffett, this is how he started with Ben Graham, is free work. Ben Graham told him, you're too expensive, right? Because Ben Graham's time was so valuable. But that's how Warren Buffett became Warren Buffett. So, and you mentioned Alan Watts. Alan Watts also said, there is no distinction between work and play. It is all play, and don't for a minute think you have to take it seriously. And I think that is this epidemic we have of people think work has to be serious and miserable, and it doesn't. It doesn't.
Man, you know what? The other thing that offering free work later in your career when you are successful, hashtag success, I mean, quote, successful is too many fucking hashtags on Instagram. Everything's a hashtag. The benefit of doing that as well is that it keeps you humble. And it is so easy to have had a few cool little successes and write a book or do, a launch and be like, oh, I'm the shit. And then somebody needs your help or you're having a conversation. That is the biggest turnoff in the world when you meet somebody like that. I mean, is there anything worse than meeting somebody who is an egomaniac or who is too good to shake your hand or too good to give you acknowledgement because they believe that they're higher up on the pedestal than you? It's awful. It creates instant division in the relationship and in that environment. It just, if you, and you know what the sad thing about it is, when a person puts themselves on that type of a pedestal, they are rewarded. People will treat them like, okay, you're godlike, and they feel good about that. But in the end, it just makes you feel more lonely, more disconnected. And what I like to do, this is just my personal opinion, no matter what success I've had, I treat the person that has had zero's traditional success as the person that I'm going to be looking up to soon. Like, who knows?
It's just true.
True,
you've
man.
Experienced it, right?
100%. They put a video on YouTube. It's badass. It took them 2 years to figure out how to do it. They finally got the formula. I've been doing it for 10 years. Vroom, gone. They have 1 million subscribers. Everybody wants their attention. And I was too cool to give them any attention.
That's a very healthy way to look at it. Yeah, you're right.
And it just doesn't feel good. I also really enjoy, looking back at how some of the classicists and, ancient people would approach things like this. And they were all humble, no matter how wise they were. I think it's super, super important. And we're just in a stage where right now, with everything going on, I can't think of a better time to live this way, to offer this, because this whole pandemic and everything that's going on for a lot of people caused them to go inward that normally wouldn't have. And so then we had this opportunity to say, what do I want to do differently in my career, in my life, in my relationships? Everything got reevaluated. And so I think for those that still haven't made that hard decision, this is the time to do so. This is what I was going to say. It's like a lot of people view making this sort of leap as a risk. I'm going to step out of that thing that I've always done that is dependable. That's my traditional sort of career that I've always been in, even though I have this dream of being a podcaster, of being an author, of being a consultant, or who knows, right? I'm just making silly examples. And they're apprehensive about making that leap. The incredible thing, though, is that the level of security that you have when you're building your dream job and your dream career, the assets that you've accumulated, dude, like your resume, like if we just looked at your resume, you have your career highlights on your website. Like today, you're the head of video for Scribe Media. You guys have published books like David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, or The Alter Ego, all these incredible books that people know, mega bestsellers, and you still have your own things that you do on the side and all these things. And you've published all these videos. You have all this experience working with authors. You published your own book. So you could, at any point in time, if you wanted to go do speaking, you could go do speaking. You were Tim Ferriss's director of special projects. So, the list goes on and on and on in terms of the network that you've built. My point is, you don't necessarily feel that on a day-to-day basis, like I have true job security. But the reality is that if shit hit the fan, you could pick up the phone, send a message to anybody at any time and get anything you wanted, like faster than anybody else could. That to me is true security. So everything that you've done is a compound effect in a positive way as well. Or like the name Charlie Hoehn, it's like your career, your resume will be you even have a podcast with 6 million downloads. So if you wanted to do that, it's like you could go, hey, I want to have a sponsor. I want to get started. Hey, look, sponsors, I've already done this before. But my point is you could literally step in any direction and recreate yourself, but it's really not recreating yourself. You're taking the next step.
Yeah. And thank you for that. What a nice ego boost. Yeah, man. And you could say the same thing about yourself. And it's like, I talk to people a lot, especially young people who are like, I have so many interests. I'm just afraid of, pursuing one particular path and it not working out. And it's like, dude, it's like, how many people do you have to see who've done like awesome work and to realize like, no, you can have everything you want. You just can't do it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I completely agree with you. And the philosophy of free work, I think, is: are you shrinking or are you expanding? Are you growing? Are you leaning out into life, or are you caving and being in scarcity mode and worrying? And that's what I see. The vast majority of people are doing the thing that feels the least risky. But when you've spent 6 months and you've applied to 400 jobs and you haven't gotten a one of them, time to change the game, right? Mm-hmm. If you spent 10 years in an unfulfilling job or series of jobs and you on a soul level are crying out for a change, it's time to make a change. Free work is by far the most effective means I've seen of getting into a position that you actually care about, whether you're starting from scratch, whether you're starting over, or you're just completely reinventing yourself. Like, it works. It works really well. Billionaires use it. If they're using it, you might want to examine how you're approaching your career.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so well said, man. Dude, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm so appreciative. It's so good. I feel so lucky that I get to do this. And for me, this is also a form of play, Charlie, as you probably picked up on. Like the fact that I get to hit you up, get on, Zoom, do this whole thing, see you, connect with you, have a great, meaningful, intentional conversation. This is just pure play, man. This is incredible.
I agree, man. And you're a fantastic interviewer, and it's because of the spirit that you bring. And I don't think I've ever been asked that question. And granted, we're friends, so it helps that we have that. But like, I don't think I've ever been asked the question, like, what is it that you wish people are like that you could talk about? Some interviewers ask like, what's the one question you wish people ask you about? And that's not good framing. You framed it perfectly. And
I don't like that question, actually. Yeah. Good. I'm glad. That's the first time I've asked it. It felt right with you.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Yeah.
And you also started with like, here's what I'm scared of in my life right now. Here's the thing I'm struggling with. And that was great. So thank you. Thank you for having me, man. And you're not lucky. You're blessed, and you have set yourself up to be blessed. Luck is the world's just happening to me. You made this happen.
Thank you. So did you. Thank you. Real recognize real, man. Appreciate you.
Likewise. All right, bud.